So Creativity in the Time of COVID-19, or CTC-19, is this fantastic project that was started as an idea at the Michigan State University and then sort of became this nationwide collaboration.
From our art studio, which is like
the tinier space.
Like right now it's a college.
So students have been at the heart of this project from the very start. And we wrote this grant all together, like staying up into the middle of the night. I mean, it was like 3 weeks of absolute insanity. We never thought it was gonna work, but it was students. And it was their passion and love and drive and absolute just like commitment to this project that has like taken it from this idea, this like tiny little baby idea, into this amazing, flourishing project.
The wheat bear.
Oh,
Like in the little crook.
This is like an event if we needed to fit little on.
Something that was just really important about this project was we just were able to connect with a lot of people all over the world. We could see how people were affected by COVID through their artwork, and it brought all of us together as we obviously all went through COVID and we all had to deal with it some way, and many of these people did it through artwork. These people were able to overcome something that was so intense in their lives and so traumatic. They were able to make it into something beautiful and can kind of just take a step back into our history of what we all went through a few years ago.
New COVID-19 infections. The 10,412 positive test surpasses the previous record.
The height of the pandemic was very difficult in some ways and very easy in others. I had a rather significant birthday that happened in March of 2020 after we had all gotten locked down for the pandemic. So I had my birthday alone in my apartment and that was just like, happy birthday to me. Which, you know, of course that was just the reality of what that had to be then, right? So like there were things like that were, you know, sort of like really deeply disappointing, and thankfully, I didn't have any of the really significant health scares that many people did. You know, many people lost people in the pandemic. So if I have a bad birthday, I'll count that a blessing.
In June of 2020, my 65-year-old dad, Mark Urquiza, became ill with COVID-19. He was otherwise an exuberant, healthy guy who got sick early in the pandemic, a time when we didn't have vaccines, a time when we still didn't know how COVID spread, how to keep one another safe. And unfortunately, he died. Along with his death, before vaccines were available, 4 other members of my family died from COVID. This was a nightmare.
There have been so many pandemics and so many periods where we don't have the stories of the people that have lived through those experiences, and we don't have necessarily the art, we don't have all of this, but we also don't have the stories of their lives and how it impacted them and how art or how creativity impacted that experience.
Hello, my name is Simona Serafinoska. As has already been mentioned, I'm a PhD student at the Washington University in St. Louis.
Myself and my colleague Craig Pearson, we had been starting our own little projects from the ground up really since the pandemic, since March 2020, when those doors closed. We were roommates, so we were like, we have to record this, we have to document what's going on. And a similar experience, of course, was being felt worldwide, and at Michigan State University that materialized in the form of Creativity in the Time of COVID. So what they contributed, what they really started, is this international database of art with over 2,000 pieces that were contributed by artists and, you know, filmmakers, but also amateurs.
And sort of seeing it over there, and then they walk into the space.
Okay.
And then each, so you're familiar.
Here at WashU, we're at the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. What we really took from creativity in the time of COVID, from this database of art, is a lens and a focus, not only of what we think traditionally as being the health humanities, but also thinking about really a broader representation of what is health humanities. Because at the end of the day, this moment in time, the pandemic, was a health humanities crisis. And really, in my opinion, everything that was created at that time was part of the health humanities.
My husband would come home from work every day with those blue masks. You see masks laying on the road and on the street and all this stuff. And I'm like, I have to do something with these masks. I don't know what I'm doing with these masks. I have to do something. And then one day I thought, you know what? I wonder what the statistics are. I followed the statistics for Michigan. Tonight I embroidered the date that I was doing it. I put how many reported had COVID and then how many had died in the center. And so, yeah, I did that every night. It was just it became a ritual that I was embroidering those every night. You want to make something beautiful if it's sacred, right? And you want to embellish it. And so there's something about embroidery that is that embellishment, right? So there's something very sacred about that process.
When we say creativity, it's not just a professional art. It includes everyday creative expression, including sourdough bread making, a lot of Animal Crossing.
Yep.
A lot of
Minecraft.
Yeah,
videos,
exactly.
all of these things. We wanted to make sure it wasn't just, oh, I had to have been Picasso during COVID, right? It was about how did people turn to creativity and what did that mean for their lives? We developed a survey to reach out to all sorts of different communities, particularly focusing on BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ and disability communities.
So many different groups across the world. There's a lot of different accessibility things that we had to figure out before the survey could go out. So
in the survey, we asked about how people were turning to creativity to cope with the pandemic.
Part of the survey was about collecting those stories along with the art so that people weren't just saying, here's what I did. They were also saying, yeah, and here's why it mattered to me, or here's what was going on when I created this. And that's such an important part of this project.
This incredible event, which I think is really great. We've decided to focus here in the satellite exhibition on neurodiversity, accessibility, and self-care. In the spring of 2021, I began work with this project. It kind of spoke to some of the research that I do in disability studies, and I wanted to kind of bring that voice more so back to the Academy. What we decided to focus on here at the Air Force Academy was neurodiversity, accessibility, and self-care. And we wanted to bring neurodiversity to the forefront because at the Air Force Academy, everybody is of able body or is in some way, maybe temporarily not of able body, but in some way transitioning back to that. And that's just the nature of the military, which is very different than a lot of other institutions. So what I wanted to open up in conversations is that while that may be the case, we all think a little bit differently, and some even more so than others. And so I wanted to bring critical conversations about neurodiversity in because I think the pandemic really highlighted how much we can change the way society works with a few small steps, and that makes it much more inclusive. And then having accessibility and having options available to those people who do think differently and being able to bring them into the conversation, because the more voices and perspectives that we have in the conversation, we have found obviously enriches what we are able to do.
When we think about accessibility, we think about trying to make something as open as possible to as many people as possible. And that's been something that's been foregrounded in the creativity in the time of COVID-19 project. And part of that means making work that is accessible to disabled people, making work that's accessible to low-income people, making work that's accessible to people of color, to people of different genders and sexualities. And this is a part of the work that we do, and we see disability access as a necessary intervention into that space.
Our arts initiative has been around since 2016. Our main stake is Braille. We produce about 30 million Braille pages a year, so Braille is kind of our bread and butter. It could be anything from a Braille program to a brochure to gallery guides, anything in between. This is a tactile graphic. Well, this is the original of it that we did for the Museum of the American Revolution. As you can see, there's a lot going on here. With a tactile graphic, you aren't in a position to where you can, show a direct replica of everything that is shown here. So we will work with a museum and they will pinpoint the most important things, and then we will work with our graphic designer to come up with what we call a tactile graphic. It is a raised texture on paper, so if you touch it, you can feel the key details that someone who is sighted can see. And we also have a tactile key up here. There were a lot of things going on. You had a lot of soldiers in the background. You had a lot of things going on. So the tactile key kind of helps them be able to follow along and check out the abstract.
코로나 시기 때 그렇게 저는 회사 동료들과 같이 행진도 하고요. 많은 사람들을 만나서 발자장애 권리를 외치고 있어요. 그리고 저는 개인적으로, 정말 개인적으로는 틱톡이라는 어플을 사용해서 영상을 만들고요. 그 유튜브도 조금 운영을 했었어요. 지금은 잘 안 하지만. 그래서 그런 개인적인 그런 것도 있고, 코로나 시기 때 어쨌든 잘 힘들었지만 어쨌든 동료들과 같이 함께 잘 그 시기를 잘 지나간 것 같아요. 미래는 아무런 힘듦이 없고 잘 신탄대로 그때그때 맞춰서 사업을 잘 하고 돈 들어오면서 사업을 잘 진행되면 좋겠고, 미래는 더 건강해지면서 이 활동들이 잘 진행되면 좋겠고, 무엇보다 발달장애인의 권리가 더 선택권이 더 넓어져서 그거를 더 확실하게 많은 사람들의 100명이라는 조직을 모아서 같이 목소리를 내면 좋을까 생각이 들었어요.
Myself, I have a neurological disorder that causes episodic muscle spasms, sometimes that causes hiccups in my speech, and that can take me to the ground. I've experienced vertigo, I've experienced all sorts of different components of what it means to live in a intersectionally disabled body. And that really has taught me so much about what it means to think about the artistic community and the experience. I care so much about having art that we can touch, to be thinking about different disability communities, to be thinking about multi-sensory ways of engaging with art, and also just to be as inclusive as humanly possible. I feel like that is the place where we're really just still struggling to make it all the way, and so this is just us trying our damn best.
So for this curation process, something that we were very focused on, so especially this satellite exhibit, we really wanted to make sure that we were showcasing work by queer artists, by artists of color, and by artists who were local to Buffalo.
I've had the pleasure of doing research for the University of Buffalo for the past 3 years, and one of the things that I was luckily able to study was a relationship between the African American community in Buffalo. Buffalo is one of the most segregated cities in the United States of America, within the top 10 most segregated cities. And an art exhibition or a gallery space has traditionally been a space designed for kind of elite artists, which translates in this context to, well, white male artists. Having to go outside of that kind of venue is extremely gratifying, of trying to bring more diverse communities into such a elite contextual field.
I would say that when organizing the exhibition, of course, like, we had advertised our exhibition as being focused on LGBTQ, BIPOC, and or like Buffalo and Western New York based artists. But it's one thing to say that and put it out there, and it's quite another to like actually get a diverse group of people submitting, right? And I think that I was very pleasantly surprised by how successful the exhibition was, and I think that's entirely because of the communities that we were working with in getting the word out there, right? It wasn't just sort of a if you build it, they will come kind of thing, which is, I think, deeply problematic on a number of levels. It was much more about building sort of meaningful relationships with community partners and then having them help us connect with local artists, connect with local communities that then submitted their work to this exhibition.
We also wanted to prioritize those projects that were really focused around the idea of community and connection to other people. So we saw Tallulah Gordon's Queer Community of Buffalo, and automatically we were like, we have to include this because this is kind of exactly the work that we're looking for, this representation of what the life of queer people of color and Buffalo people, what it looks like. And so that's one of the reasons that I think it's like just one of the best projects that we have included in here. And I can't even say that because there's every single project is just absolutely incredible.
So this piece, Mimicry, however you want to say it. I made it in 2020 for the show. I feel like I've been here before. That was my first solo paint exhibition. In the pandemic times, in the quarantine times, I felt it was necessary to maintain some sort of narrative, and that included making sure the relationship I was in was one that looked good. If I'm having an issue or having a hard time understanding my gender and what I see in the world and what I've been taught is that your value is based on whether or not you have partnership, then you kind of hold on to whatever shitty thing is happening and you keep everything else to yourself. Between now and these times, I didn't have the words to express what I was feeling or whatever, and that's why I was making paintings. This piece, specifically Mimicry, I was actually in the midst of a breakdown, and I was like, wouldn't it be so funny I just set up a camera right now and then reenacted it as it was happening, and then I set up the camera and I was like, no, I still feel really bad. And I just got back under the covers, and then my cat started crawling on me. If I'm taking a step back and looking at the whole concept of mimicry and the biological reasoning for it, it is survival. It's a survival mechanism in nature. I'm getting weirder in what I'm making because I've gotten out and processed and have better language about how I'm feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like, those paintings serve their purpose.
한 가지 말씀을 이제 드려야 되는 부분이 원래는 이런 작업들을 했었어요. 이렇게 인간관계에 대한 이야기들을 했었어요. 근데 이게 코비드를 겪으면서 제가 이 내 방을 여행하는 법이라는 이 책을 조금씩 이렇게 기록하기 시작하면서 공간이라는 걸로 넘어와서 지금 아예 다른 작업을 하게 됐고, 그래서 아티스트 이름도 바꾸게 된 이유가 그거거든요. 여기는 인간관계에 대한 이야기들이 많이 숨어 있는데 그때의 주제는 사실 하이드 앤 시크였어요. 그래서 사람의 내면을 어떤 사람한테는 많이 보여주기도 하고 조금 보여주기도 하고 하는 부분에 대한 것들을 많이 연구하고 그걸 철학적으로 좀 담아내려고 했지만 이 안에서 귀여움으로 표현하는 거는 조금 더 우호적으로 표현을 하고 싶었어요. 그래서 사람을 직접적으로 그리지 않았는데 코로나19에 있으면서 인간관계가 과연 우리한테 얼마만큼의 의미가 있을까라는 것들을 굉장히 많이 생각을 하게 됐고, 그 다음부터는 오히려 우리한테 진짜 중요한 거는 안락한 공간이다라는 것을 찾게 됐어요. 그래서 그 안에서 어떻게 보면 여행이라는 것 자체가 새로운 것을 그냥 접하는 것도 중요하지만 새롭게 다시 한번 돌아보고 그것을 좀 발견하는 것도 하나의 여행이다라고 얘기를 하고 있는 게 그 철학책에 들어있는 이야기거든요. 그래서 그런 부분에서 조금 착안을 하게 됐고, 거기서 공간을 그러면 관객들한테 이렇게 하나하나 다 보여주면서 마치 관객이 함께 여행하는 것처럼 내가 이것을 더.
A lot of these projects, obviously have that context of COVID-19, and some it's very apparent. We have one, the COVID tribute poster project by Soren Glassing, that is all posters created for victims of COVID-19 and those who have passed. And so in that small way, those memories are able to be preserved and they are able to live on in a way, and we get to know them even in a small way. For others, we have this beautiful postcard project that is by Lorenzo Camacho that is all about the Colombian resistance and dreams, and so it's this beautiful mixture of both depictions of those dreams and depicting this really difficult moment, but also looking ahead and into the future.
Hundreds of thousands of children have been orphaned by COVID. Our rough best estimate is that this is 350,000 children in the United States who've lost a parent or caretaker from COVID.
When the rest of the world and the rest of the country is pretending like this is no big deal, or that it was natural, or that it would have happened anyway. That fundamentally this was a preventable disaster. It's what we in academia call a slow disaster, that it's something that's exacerbated by structural inequities, and really foregrounds how so many losses are made invisible by the discourse around them. And so this is why commemoration is so crucial and why it's so important that it be community-led.
We have been working for the last several years on a national COVID memorial. It is an incredible project in which people in our community, folks who have lost loved ones to COVID, have submitted individual remembrances of loved ones that they've lost, including a photograph, their name, also a small obituary about their loved one. This memorial has provided an incredible amount of healing and validation for people who've lost loved ones to COVID.
And then with the information that we get from that process, we can tag things in the archive with things like demographic information again and the content of the art pieces. And we can provide insight on how these factors interact within the art and...
Digital Archive is the digital repository for all the material that was collected during the grant period. This is several thousand objects that will be available to the public once we're done. Our goals here were to create a robust and organized data repository that allow for us to describe the content of the material submitted by the people who answered the survey. So for us, that was a huge part of the project. It involved us trying to think through both the history of how people might think about searching, but also because at the end of the project cycle, we want to send this material to the MSU archive. We also needed to make sure we had a data architecture that had all the vital metadata, that is the kind of information that's required for archive record embedded in the structure of the archive.
Now, the work that we've done to make the lingering objects for creativity in the time of COVID-19 accessible have been to host them on an Omeka platform, which means it is inherently accessible and legible to screen readers. And we've built into each of the descriptions both the item description itself, alt text for the images, and extended descriptions that feature the artist's statements themselves about the work and its position within the larger archive.
So the project I did with students was the outgrowth of a larger project entitled Reflections of Us. And part of this was to help students see not only themselves in the work that we do, but how the work that we do can be a reflection of the communities around us, and how we can take the power of community that we build within choirs, because we say music to bring people together, but oftentimes we don't focus on that enough. And so what I had students do is recognize that we as a community could provide a service that was mutually beneficial to us as a choir and to the communities that we wanted to connect with through this project. And so we were able to connect with several retirement homes at a time when folks couldn't be together during COVID. I think you remember that, when people couldn't visit their loved ones and they were looking at each other through screens. And we know that the human condition is built upon being able to connect with people physically and sometimes through music, which is another way to connect to emotions and to people's souls. So we gathered songs from these folks that were that sparked great memories of their past and maybe even connections that they had with families. And we performed these pieces and then put them together in a video project and made these things available to not only the people in the retirement homes that felt isolated from their families, but to their families so that they could share this experience of listening to each other, listening to music, maybe even at the same time when they couldn't be in the same place at the same time, while also helping our students learn that we are capable of creating something bigger than us. And you don't have to do one giant thing by yourself to be impactful. All of us doing one small thing in an intentional and committed way created something that was just as important.
One thing that I would like people to take from this exhibit is that even in moments of strife, there are ways for you to access your creativity and for you to take things into your own hands.
This creation process in and of itself brought so much meaning and so much understanding, and it really going back and listening to their voices from March 2020 and then from 2021 and then from 2022, it really just is so profound and so meaningful to us that we have them. And it's some of these stories that I think we would have blacked out or forgotten or suppressed because they're so difficult to cope with. But now with perspective and with a little bit of distance, maybe we can learn from them and experience them again.